That's a prompt. Thank you, Dana. Well done. So I think that was our prompt to stop talking and get on with the show. So thank you for that. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Welcome, Dr. Asbun. And in a moment, I'll turn it over to Dr. Schweitzberg to introduce our speaker. But first, I just want to welcome everybody to the Drapanas Lectureship and spend a few minutes just considering the life of Ted Drapanas. I think the residents all know, and you all know, that I like the history of our program and where we've been, and people that have been here before means a lot to me. And Dr. Drapanas is a big part of that. And obviously, I never knew him. He passed away in a plane crash in 1975. So that was long before I ever came to Buffalo. But I did, each year I get to spend a lot of time with his sister Sophia, and we'll hear a message from her in a little bit. Obviously, she can't be here, but I get to spend a lot of time with her at graduation each year. And with the stories she tells, I feel like I know Dr. Drapanas somewhat from her history. I also got to know his brother fairly well, and between those two giving me information, I feel like I have a good idea of who he was. Dr. Drapanas was an amazing person who I think is someone whom all the residents can aspire to be. He was born in Buffalo in 1930. He entered medical school at the age of 17. So if there's any medical students that are on the call, think about that. At 17 years old, he was done with college and was in the medical school. Graduated at age 21. He went on and he completed his residency at the E.J. Meyer, which is what our program used to be called, under John Stewart. That was the old ECMC was E.J. Meyer, and that's where he trained. And that was our very historic time when John Stewart took over the training program and really brought us into the modern era of training. For any of the residents that want to read more about that, I have a pretty interesting I wouldn't call it a book, but it's a pretty long journal of the years between, I think, 42 and 62. At any rate, he went on and came out of the residency. He was boarded in both thoracic and general surgery at the end of that time. He had research fellowships, the Buswell Fellow, was very academically active. He joined the faculty, and by the age of 32, he was a full professor. So you think about that in the context of today. This guy was somebody who was driven, motivated, and did everything academically that he could. He went on to Pittsburgh, and from there to Tulane, where he was chair. And he was a chair there at a very, very early age. You can do the math. He was, I think, in the 40s. So just a tremendous driven guy. He was in all the important surgical societies, published, taught, operated. This was a guy who did everything. And yet I think that's not why I like him so much from what I've heard. He was, we talk about a triple threat. We talk about the academician and the teacher and the surgeon. But he was more than that. He had a whole other life, and he was able to achieve the balance. We all talk about balance, but this guy had it. He did all these things and also had an incredible life. He comes from an incredible family, and when I say he had the balance, I know that from speaking with his brother Alex, who did the same thing. He was a dentist, and he would often say to me, "Why don't you just take off a day a week?" And he didn't mean a one day on the weekend, like I sort of take that. Maybe I should take a day off on the weekend. He meant take off an extra day a week. He said that these are all choices we make. And I think Ted Drapanas made those choices and was able to achieve everything he wanted professionally, but also achieve everything he wanted personally. And I think that's something that the residents should look to today. We've had the opportunity to reflect on those things with COVID and all the changes that came. Reflect on that. Think about a guy like this. You don't have to make the choice. You have to establish the balance. You can have everything you want to have. Now, that's hypocrisy on my part, but I'm working on it. I think my message to the residents would be, work on that yourselves. Achieve both things like Dr. Drapanas did. I think, Dana, can we play the message? We have a message from his sister, Sophia, who's also a really remarkable person. I wish she could be here because her stories are incredible as well.
Injured in an airline crash on June 25th, 1975, at the age of 45. His life and work are monuments to all that is good about academic surgery, and his memory is perpetuated in the Drapanas Lectureship supported by the Department of Surgery at the State University of New York at Buffalo. The alumni of the surgical training program of the university and its systems of teaching hospitals. Please stop by and say hello if you are at the annual memorial lectureship in Buffalo, New York. I'd be happy to meet you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
So that was Sophia, really amazing. I wish that you could meet her and talk to her because the stories she can tell, the people that she's interviewed over the years, she was a media person, is remarkable, as well as the stories of Ted Drapanas and the Drapanas family. Hopefully next year we'll be back to normal, and you guys will all, or some of you who are still here, will have the opportunity to speak with her and enjoy that. So with that, I think I'll turn it over to Dr. Schweitzberg to introduce our speaker.
Thanks, Jim. And Dana, if you can take down the slide share so I can share. Great. And give me a moment. Fantastic. So it's an honor and a pleasure, Horacio, to welcome you and to introduce you to the Department of Surgery. I wish all 70-something people on this call could meet you in person because you've had a truly remarkable career, and we will invite you back to come speak in person because Western New York in June is really the place to be, and want to have you to enjoy our hospitality, but we will have to do that in the future. For everybody, Dr. Asbun is the Chief of Hepatobiliary and Pancreatic Surgery at the Miami Cancer Institute and Professor of Surgery at the Mayo Clinic College of Medicine and Science, but he's a lot more than that. He is the current president of SAGES, the Society of American Gastrointestinal and Endoscopic Surgery, and if you are a general surgeon who uses a laparoscope, this is your surgical society. And it's an honor to have Horacio and his predecessors come and give this Drapanas lecture for the last 5 years. He's also on the Executive Council of the American Hepatopancreatic Biliary Association, chairman of the video-based education of the ACS in the past, founding member of the G4 Alliance, International Laparoscopic Liver Surgery, International Minimally Invasive Pancreatic Surgery. He has been the editor-in-chief of the ACS Multimedia Atlas, which has produced some fine works, but I happen to be partial to the hernia book because he and I worked on that together, and it turned out to be a great piece of work. He's been on the editorial board of Surgical Endoscopy. He has written and participated in the writing of the NCCN guidelines for pancreatic cancer, which is particularly relevant to us as we go through our journey for COC accreditation at our cancer program. He's a member of 25 medical societies. And when I saw that, I didn't know that about you, Horacio. All I can think of, that's a lot of dues to pay, for sure. He's been a member of so many expert surgical initiatives, the International Study Group of Pancreatic Surgery, the Tokyo Guidelines, European Consensus, chair of the evidence-based international guidelines for minimally invasive pancreatic resection. And if you get the sense that this is one of the most talented technical surgeons in the world, you'd be on the right track. 150 peer review articles, 110 videos, and I've enjoyed watching not all 110 of them, but really I've seen many of them. They're really not only incredibly well done, but show incredible technical skill. 35 book chapters, some books, 530 presentations in the US. And so my first thought is like, when do you work actually? That's a lot of presentations, but that's really not how I like to think of Horacio. I think of him a little bit differently. I think of him as a global surgeon. and he has given 410 invited presentations in Europe, Asia, Africa, Oceania, and the like, and is an honorary fellow of so many international surgical societies and has been inducted and received tons of awards from all over the world. Now, you can imagine that this is sort of like the Dos Equis commercial. He's one of the more interesting men in the room, and you can find him just about anywhere. You can find him, you know, in Japan giving lectures. In the center is our good friend Manabu Yamamoto, who has been instrumental in building relationships with Japan. So many other great surgeons. Mike Brunt has been here. Danny Scott's been here. It's a pleasure to have Horacio here. He can be seen on panels with some of the most well-known hepatobiliary surgeons in the world. This is Go Wakabayashi. I'm not sure he's thrilled with what Go is saying at the moment. But after the work is done, Horacio has taken that time that Dr. Lucan talks about. Here he is in front of the Golden Palace with Scott Melvin, another past president of SAGES. And you know, he really does know how to mix the work and the play. He can be seen on top of the tallest skyscrapers in the world, having a drink. But he also understands that it's important to get into the culture of many of these places. This is in Kyoto. I didn't know that Horacio had such a penchant for hats, but as I looked through my pictures, I found that he really, many of them has many interesting hats on. He can be seen in the Middle East with another one of his favorite hats. And but this is the hat I like to think of him that he's most comfortable in. Really one of the world's truly finest technical surgeons. This year's president of SAGES, has done so much incredible global work, led the SAGES Global Task Force, is truly an international surgeon of the world. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I present Dr. Horacio Asbun, my friend, this year's SAGES president, to give this year's Drapanas lecture for you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. What can I say? That was a fantastic introduction. And it makes it fantastic, not only because of all the things you said, and it's nice to hear, but it because comes from you. And you know, past the friendship that we both have, which, you know, it's has been through so many years, is how much I respect you. And many of the things I have done following some of the steps you have taken before show me that you have done them well. And I think of you often. As a sign, I just ask you to join us again as one of our advisors to the board. Thank you for doing that. Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
Good. Then my job today is to talk about innovation in surgery. And I'm not gonna go all over. I'm gonna use mainly what I would consider has been probably the most important innovation of the 20th century, and probably beyond that, that's laparoscopic surgery. But I'll start by talking about some of the basic things of innovation too, and I'll tell you the good, the bad, and the wrong, or the ugly. Remember this for later on in the lecture. We think innovation is something so cool, but it moves at a tremendous rate. This little robot that I saw not too long ago, I thought that was the coolest thing. Here, directing the orchestra, the symphony orchestra in Japan. However, later on, you'll see that only a few years later, things have changed significantly. These are my conflicts, but should not be any conflict for this presentation. I want you to keep in mind that innovation implies change. Change implies departure from the old. And you will see through this presentation that departure from the old creates resistance in pretty significant ways. At the same time, it forces us to reassess the validity of the traditional principles. For example, do we use the NG tubes? Do we feed the patients or not feed the patients? Drains, T-tubes, etc. Those were very simple, practical examples. But those were the things that both Dr. Schweitzer and myself have lived through. We used to believe everything they told us, and we followed to the T. And then we realized that with innovation, we have to reassess all of those validities. And I propose to you, you should do that throughout your career. However, ethical principles should not change, should definitely not change. And traditional principles.
Hey, good morning. Hi, Mr. Rivera. How are you?
Change is the law of life. JFK say that those who look only to the past and present are certain to miss the future. And keep that in mind. I'm going to start by a very funny story. And you would think innovation, well, this was innovation then. These were the two first surgeons that allowed themselves to be filmed. One was Doyen from Paris, and the other one was Mester from Berlin. But Doyen is the one that's attributed. But he was really treated badly. He was eliminated from all surgical societies. They talked, this was a character in Paris and saying that he basically did not respect the surgery. And all of this was because he decided to show his movies to the world, and he showed movies on movie theaters from surgeries. This is one of them. He's doing a thyroidectomy. This is this is felt to be one of the first videos done in history about surgery. He's doing here a thyroidectomy. You can see the anesthesiologist dripping a little bit more ether every time. This is ether. That's the bottle. Now look at how the patient is going to start breathing. The assistant is holding this, but it's also holding the belly and the chest, and that way it doesn't move. The surgeon opens that, blood spilling all over, a little bit more ether. This surgeon was chastised. A few years later, we started to not only thinking that that was a good idea, but there was a whole initiative about video-based education and teaching. It was not easy. Not too long ago, in 1950, in order to have 15 minutes of film, you require 122 meters of film. And there were 40 frames per foot. Therefore, it was very difficult. If you think today how easy it becomes to do a video, you realize how innovation can go so fast in less than 50 years. But I want to talk now, and I'm going to concentrate a lot on the laparoscopic revolution, the development and dissemination of laparoscopic cholecystectomy. The positive aspects was that the revolution in surgery was so enormous and with great benefit to the patient that really resuscitated the practice of surgery and demanded a parallel technological progress that I don't think was ever seen in the history of surgery before. Historically, the change occurred gradually. With laparoscopic surgery, the change occurred rapidly. With rapid change, there was a problem. A group of surgeons took advantages. And this group of surgeons, sometimes they weren't always the best surgeons, not always with the best intentions. They had completely biased, and they capitalized on the consumer demand. There was lack of quality control, inadequate training, and really lack of common sense sometimes. With rapid change, a large group of practice surgeons on the other side, which were the most conservative, the most cautious, fell behind. There was a gap between surgeons. There were problems in regards to training, credentialing, and there was significant rejection to change. There was also bias, but this time there was bias criticism. All the experts, the surgical experts, talk about laparoscopic surgery, and they really were not experts in laparoscopic surgery, but they have been experts about everything else. Then they thought they were experts, and then many of them they found to be wrong in the future. The negative aspects of the rapid change, that increased complications rate for some procedures. There were procedures that were developed that didn't make sense. And there were alternative agendas and goals driven by personal benefit. Let's go back, however, and talk a little bit about rejection and how everything started. Who did the laparoscopic cholecystectomy? For many years, we thought were the French, but there was only 5 years after the first laparoscopic cholecystectomy started, or I would say even more later than that, that we found out that the first laparoscopic cholecystectomy was done by Erich Muhe. He was a surgeon in Germany who had worked with Dr. Sem, and Dr. Sem in the 1980s was doing laparoscopic appendectomies. Then he was an avid bicyclist, and following the bicycle tube that he had Hans Frost built a galloscope, and the galloscope was like single incision. This was back in 1985. And in September 12, 1985, he did the first laparoscopic cholecystectomy. This was his galloscope, and this is the picture of his first patient. He used 2 small ports in the pelvis, and he used the galloscope in the belly button. People think that single incision surgery is a novelty. In 1985, we're talking 35 years ago, he did this. And he presented his results in 1986, a year later, 94 procedures at the German Surgical Society. He modified a little bit the procedure. What happened in 1986 when he presented this? He had a tremendous rejection. People said it's dangerous, small incisions for small brains, Mickey Mouse surgery, and the surgical establishment in Germany started chasing this guy. First, since he was an avid bicycler, they said that he actually used the bicycle frame to perform his first laparoscopic cholecystectomy. In 1987, after having done over 100 laparoscopic cholecystectomies without a single important complication, he had a patient that went to the ICU and died because of anesthesiologist's problem. The patient died. He was prosecuted, but not prosecuted on your malpractice. He went to criminal court for manslaughter, which was dragged for years. This brilliant man was not only chastised, but isolated and was traumatized. They say that he got into a depression, and for years, he came out of the limelight. What happened in France? We'll come back to what happened next to Dr. Muhe later. Now, what happened in France? In 1987, the first laparoscopic cholecystectomy was done. 2 years later. We don't know if this was a French guy that was at the Congress or not, but everybody attributed that he was the first surgeon doing laparoscopic cholecystectomies, along with Périssat and Dubois, who did it in 1988. And we all thought for years that these were the first guys doing laparoscopic cholecystectomy. They created the French technique. They were the publication. They did it right. And they weren't chastised at as Dr. Muhe had. What happened in the United States? In 1988, the same year, William Say, a gynecologist, joined partners with a surgeon, Barry McKernan, and they did on June 22nd, the first laparoscopic cholecystectomy. But they had met days before with Dr. Eddie Joe Reddick and Dr. Douglas Olson. And they had discussed how to do this, and both decided to start. And Eddie Joe Reddick and Douglas Olson did it only a few days later. And it was interesting. Dr. Reddick said, we couldn't find anyone who was actually doing this, so we decided to attempt it ourselves. Can you imagine if we do that today? Those were those times. Interestingly enough, they have an insufflator that was 5 millimeters of mercury. That's all what it insufflated. But he said that's what did the trick. This was one of their first publications. And I'm going to stop a little bit because I got to know them very closely. And I saw what they went through, and I believe these were the 2 people that really are responsible for the laparoscopic revolution. Many people criticize them, rightly so, not so much because of them, but because people that follow their model of teaching 1-2 days and then sending everybody saying, you know how to do laparoscopic cholecystectomy. There was a tremendous controversy. People said that they were monetary profits. I heard people talking about Reddick and Olson. Well, I know Eddie Joe Reddick well. I knew him very well. And he told me when I met him, I was a resident 4th year. I heard that they were doing this, and I insisted so much that they finally accepted me to do an elective rotation in 1989. And I spent 1 month with them. It was a fantastic rotation. The only thing I did was laparoscopic cholecystectomies. And afterwards, after all the hustle had slowed down because they had between 20 and 30 observers every single day, at night, they still used to do open surgery, and I used to assist them. And he used to become really, melancholic because of the way how stressful was, all of these visitors. He was just a man from the South that wanted to make money and wanted to retire. He told me that he had promised his wife that he was going to retire at 45. And he said, I don't know why the academicians are mad at me. I mean, people makes a lot of money. I don't charge extra to my patients. I'm not harming anybody. And all my colleagues locally, I am inviting them. But there was another, thing. He said, I want to be a country music star. And indeed, he quit surgery at 43 years old. And this is something that he gave me. He wrote a song, country music. This was when I was a resident still. He went to the back of his, to the trunk of his car one day at 11:30 at night after we finished surgery, and he gave me this, and I asked him to sign it. And since then, he went into country music, and he failed. But what it was very interesting is the story of all this. He had great promoting skills. And yes, I don't agree with what he did. I wouldn't do it, but I understand why he did it. He just wanted to be successful. In Nashville, they created the laparoscopic cholecystectomy tea parties. The first day I entered into his operating rooms, as I said, never charged the patients or local MDs other than just for the cholecystectomy and a fee for laparoscopy. But he was very smart, because these tea parties were because he gave his videos, his VHSs, to the patient as soon as the surgery finished. And he used to say on the video, he used to talk to the patient. I used to think, what's going on? I thought that the patient was under local anesthesia, but no, he was under general. And he told me, well, I need to narrate these videos because if not, they don't understand what I'm doing. I received 20,000 calls. And he used to say, let's say, Dr. Schweisberg comes to help me. He brings me a patient. Dr. Schweisberg, I tell him, listen, hey, Dr. Schweisberg, come, you will participate together. And he brings me a patient, and I would say, hey, Mrs. Smith, in the video, Dr. Schweisberg, your surgeon is here with me. But Steve wouldn't talk throughout the surgery. I'm the one talking, and it's being recorded. Just prior to finishing the last little nick, taking out the gallbladder, he would say, and prime the audience, he would say, hey, Mrs. Smith, don't worry about it. Don't get scared. You're going to hear a lot of people clapping. There's people that come from all over the world to see me. And surely enough, that was the audience after he did the last little bit of the cholecystectomy, clapping for Dr. Eddie Joe Reddick. Then Mrs. Smith in his tea party would say, oh yeah, I love Dr. Schweisberg, but if you have a gallbladder, this guy Eddie Joe Reddick was good. Then that's how he created tons of patients. He was able to retire at 43 years old. He was also a great businessman. I remember how badly he was criticized for advertising to a laser company. Again, I don't agree with that, but he saw things different. I says, sportsmen, they wear the company's names on their jackets. Why, if a company is paying me $1 million to be on their booth, I'm not gonna be there? I don't understand it. I'm not hurting anybody. You can question that, but that was his thought. He had observers, he had hands-on courses, he had attendees, faculties. Everybody became very well treated, including the residents that became faculty at his courses. He flew me every other weekend for a year and a half on the weekends that I was off to teach on his courses, and I'm very grateful to him. His name now is forgotten, and the majority of you residents don't even know about him. And that's because, again, this happened similar to what happened to the gentleman with the video-based education that got filmed, Mr. Doyen, and what happened initially to Dr. Muhe. In 1990, in South America, a lot of funny things happened. I was a resident. I'm originally from Bolivia, but I went to Chile and I gave lectures about this. And it was crazy because people wanted to learn. In Chile, people wanted to learn immediately. I went to Bolivia where my father was a surgeon, and he said, oh, these gallbladders are going to be for gringos. And I'll get back to that. I went to Argentina and says, oh, this is not for our gallbladders. But the Chileans were extremely smart. As soon as I arrived home, my wife said at that time there were no cell phones or email. What happened? The phone has been ringing like crazy. I don't know, everybody has been calling you. And I organized a course for my old teachers, but I couldn't fit all of them. Then I said, we'll do one course now and we're gonna wait a month and do the other course. But these guys were competitors. The other group went to France And because of that, there was a huge controversy for years throughout whole South America between the French technique and the American technique. And it's funny to know that that was because we couldn't fit all of them at the same time on the course, and they competed it. And it happens that the French guys got the instruments before the Americans because the French flew to Germany and got Storch instruments. In Bolivia, 2 years later, my father calls me and says, you know what, I want you to come back and teach me cholecystectomy. I said, what happened, Dad? Well, an expert came in from the United States, moved to Bolivia, and started laparoscopic cholecystectomy, and he's doing so many that now we need to learn. My father at that time was 68 years old. That was one of the life's gifts that I have. I taught him how to do cholecystectomy, and he was one of the best laparoscopic surgeons until he retired. This expert was a private practice physician that I got to know from California, who had a problem with his license, and he decided to go to one of the hospitals, borrow the equipment, saying that he was going to take it to a different equipment, and flew with the equipment to Bolivia and never came back to practice surgery in the United States. And he had been doing cholecystectomies for 2 years, laparoscopic cholecystectomies, and he said that he was an expert and he was part of the group that started laparoscopic cholecystectomy in the United States. At that time, in Bolivia, they believed him, and he became the expert that taught him through Bolivia and in Argentina. Those were the things that were happening around the world. Anybody could say anything. We didn't have the capability of the internet and know who is who at that time. In fact, one time I was operating in Bolivia and I asked for the Hassan port, and they told me, no, we don't have it. This was 1992. And I said, yeah, I know we have it. I mean, I brought it. And then I go, I look, I scrub out, I bring it back, and the surgeon says, oh, and they tell me the name of the surgeon. Let's say, I'm not gonna say, but you know, Perez. I don't want to name the surgeon. Says, oh, the Perez Hassan port. I said, Perez Hassan port. And they said, yeah, this is the Perez Hassan port. Dr. Perez, this Bolivian expert, came in, and this is, he has developed it. And I just started laughing because he had nothing to do with this, but people believed us. This was in Bolivia in 1992. In Argentina, there was, in 1986, there was a doctoral thesis by Dr. Aldo Kleinman about doing cholecystectomy for laparoscopic cholecystectomy in animals. This was never known. I don't even know Dr. Schweizberg knows about this guy. And this was in 1986. But what happened? The Argentinian College of Surgeons say, this has no value, it's crazy. And as many times happens, a few years later, in 2016, he was awarded one of the largest, one of the most important awards by the Argentinian Society of Surgery. But that was only, 20 or 30 years later. Let's go back to Eric Muhe. What happened with him? Well, people started to find out about him. My personal experience with him, I was writing a paper in 2002, a review, and I had received a lot of literature by mail from people that published it. By then, people knew about my laparoscopic skills, and I was working with Dr. Joe Reddick and so on. And I look at this paper, it was 1992, long-term follow-up after laparoscopic cholecystectomy. And I said, long-term follow-up? I hadn't given it even the time of the day when I received it. And I see that it was 6 years later and was by this guy, Dr. Muhe. I had not heard about him. At that time, I had to go back to Bolivia to do my visa waiver for those foreigners that know what that is. And I was practicing surgery in Bolivia, and I went to the German embassy and I asked them to write to this guy, Eric Muhe, and to send me the original abstract to know if it was true. And he indeed sent me by mail to Bolivia from Dr. Muhe. This is his handwriting, the original article. This was a fax that came in the envelope, the original article of the abstract. This guy was real. At that time, no one knew about him. And it was such a pleasure to be able to write on the introduction, the history of laparoscopic cholecystectomy and the surgical clinicals chapter, that he was the first one doing the laparoscopic cholecystectomy. Obviously, later on in 1992, the same German Surgical Society that instigated the criminal suit mentioned of him one of the greatest original achievements of German medicine in recent history. And in 1999, sages who had kindly did recognize that we recognize him with the annual Karl Storz lecture. He was really recognized as one of the true inverters in laparoscopic cholecystectomy. Other funny stories, the Limber operation. I don't know if many of you know, Jacques Marisco did a surgery with a robot in New York, and Michel Garnier and Marisco did the surgery on a patient in France, and this was called the Limburg operation. This was supposed to be one of the most important advancements in surgery. This was called the transatlantic robotic assisted telesurgery. Again, the robot in New York, the patient in France. But what happened? Why we didn't hear about this? Because this happened on September 7, 2001. The surgery happened September 7, 2001. This was 4 days before 9/11. 9/11 came, this got buried in the news, and very few people knows about it. What happened after laparoscopic cholecystectomy? It was the wild, wild west. There was, as in the New York Times said, future applications may be limited only by surgeons' imaginations and the development of equipment. And that was true. A lot of bad stuff happened, but a lot of good stuff also happened. For example, this, pancreas preserving duodenectomies, only limited by our imagination. This is a procedure that I've been doing now for over 12 years. We were taught that you couldn't separate the duodenum from the pancreas, but indeed you can. And this is what you can do. This here is the duodenum. This is the common bile duct, and this is the surface of the pancreas. I want you to put attention to this very smooth surface, a single duct. This is the common bile duct and the pancreatic duct together. And since then, we have done over 30 partial pancreas preserving and 18 total duodenectomies. And this is a very cool procedure. I'm going to skip this one because I want to show you this other one. This was another patient. I've done 2 of this among the 30 patients. This patient has a pancreas divisum. And this is what you see on a pancreas divisum. You can see the Sartorini duct is the main pancreatic duct, and you can see the common bile duct. This is the duodenum. But the amazing thing, the first time I did this, was this part. We were doing the dissection, and I'm just going to go a little fast. I'll tell you another day the details of this procedure. This is one of the Nihalad's favorite procedure, by the way. And you just start separating this, and we went in little by little, and you'll get my point why I'm showing you this. And we started going, trying to separate, and we saw this groove. Remember that that area of the pancreas, which was very, very smooth? Well, here we saw this groove in the center. You see this groove where the common bile duct was coming. The pancreatic duct was here. This is the posterior pancreatic bud. This is the anterior pancreatic bud. Embryologically, as you know, pancreas divisum is because it's a failure to fuse early in the embryological development, the posterior and the anterior buds. For the first time, we're seeing it with our own eyes, an anatomic thing that we had just read on the books. This was failure to fuse the posterior bud from the anterior bud. We were so happy seeing this. Our scrub nurse said, I don't understand. Why are you so happy? You guys look like such nerds being so happy about this. But indeed, we were happy. And that's the pancreatic duct, that's the common bile duct. My anatomy teacher would be proud of that because he's the one that taught me about the posterior part. And at that time, he didn't like me. In fact, the first anatomy lab, he sent me out and he told me, you go and get a haircut, because this was my hair then. And I told him, Dr. Jimenez, you know, I'm so sorry. He said, don't tell me you're sorry. Go and apologize to yourself in the mirror. Those were the times. Let me talk about some other people that are participating in innovation. This time I'm going to talk about Buffalo University members. Nihalad. I'm not going to say she's an expert advanced HPV laparoscopic surgeon, but she has dedicated a year of her life to work extremely hard and to try to learn and suck as much innovation as she can. And yes, one day she may become one of the innovators in the world. And if not, everything she has learned, everything she's passionate about, it shows. She enjoys these innovation cases. And just to tell you what she has been doing on the last week, actually, this is the last week cases. This is a patient, actually 2 weeks, this was 2 weeks ago, this patient. This is a 32-year-old that came with bleeding. You can see hemoperitoneum, a pancreatic mass that ended being a mucinous cystadenoma with a lot of blood. This is blood here. And we were able to do this laparoscopically. She was integral part of the team taking this out. We took it out through a fine steel incision. This is another case we did this week. This is a patient that we did this case on Monday, had a cholecystectomy in September of last year and came to us with jaundice and significant abdominal pain. No cholecystectomy. I mean, no gallbladder. What is this? We didn't know what was this. Maybe a choledochal cyst type 2, but with this number of stones, maybe a type 3, we didn't know. We went into surgery laparoscopically. We opened the duodenum because we couldn't find it outside. We did an ultrasound, and this was the mass. And this mass, you can see here, had eroded and had a stone coming out. This is a choledochal seal full of stones. These are the type of cases that Nihalat is doing with us. And her way of thinking has become like this, questioning everything one has learned to validate it or not, and be able to think on innovation. And I say this to give credit to her because she has been working very hard, and to encourage a lot of you residents to look for things in what you are passionate about. Niha is passionate about innovation. What about this gentleman, Scott Tolman? This is a picture you all have, as I understand, in your residence lounge or room. This guy did the first splenectomy, or at least he's attributed to be one of the ones that did the first splenectomy. And he was one of your staff faculty members. What about this guy? Do you guys know who this is? If we would be in an auditorium, I would pause and I would ask you to guess, but obviously we're not. Yes, this is Dr. Schweizberg. Dr. Schweizberg has been a tremendous push in innovation in surgery in the United States. He has been an asset to SAGES and to all the membership pushing for innovation in a right and sound way, because that's what we need to do today, push innovation not on the crazy way. This is Dr. Schweizberg in Poland, teaching laparoscopic surgery. This is teaching the FUSE program, who has been a major force to the creation and implementation of the FUSE program. FLS in Saudi Arabia, he has chaired the FLS committee and been integral part of the expansion of the FLS. I don't know what he was doing here, teaching Paul Pierce, but you can ask him that. I have not had time to teach him, to ask him. But he's a fun guy. He's receiving the Smithsonian Computer World Laureate Award in 2000, and he's giving one of TED Talk. I just want to say that innovators are there and sometimes are close to you and you don't see them. And if you see them, you don't squeeze them enough. Believe me, Niha squeezes me every day. You should squeeze of those innovators that life has given you the opportunity to work with. This again is in Japan. He showed some of the pictures. I was smart enough not to be in this picture and to be the one taking it. Let's go back to what happened next. Race to be the first and put your name on it. There were a lot of ethical issues. Who? Empowerment of the individual. The individuals were empowered. Anybody could do it. Who should, where should this be done in academics? And what should we do and when? It was very difficult, especially for us, for the group of people like Dr. Schwab and myself, that yes, we're encouraged, we want to do new things, but we need to do them well. I didn't know what to do. And if you remember one thing of this lecture, I want you to remember there. Yes, I wanted to be one of the first ones doing things. I wanted to push innovation. I'm passionate about it. How could I know? There wasn't any books or randomized controlled trials. And I have used something that's cliche, very common, very simple, but has guided me throughout my life in surgery. Don't do it if you wouldn't do it in a member of your family. That's simple. If you want to do something new, if you want to put an extra stitch, if you want to quit surgery because the case is difficult, decide what would you do in a member of your family? You will be surprised. Sometimes things in surgery are extremely dangerous and you want to stop because it's too dangerous. But if this would be your brother, your friend, you would stick out your neck, you would go and take the risk, and you would do it. Keep that thought in your mind for the rest of your careers. Has served me very, very well. One caveat, you need to think of a member of your family you like, of course. Associate with a group of individuals that are alike you in regards to principles and innovation. These are positive disruptors. In my case, I was fortunate enough to be part of a great group of positive disruptors, SAGES. SAGES has been a tremendous force. SAGES has been where individuals have been empowered, and we have been able to empower at the same time other peoples across the world, and we have seen how everybody has flourished on that. And this is the playing field has been leveled. This was from a book from Nilekani talking about the world is flat. And among the flattening, it says that this is a process by which individuals as well as companies become empowered. And many times in developing countries with large labor forces are empowered to compete in the world arena. To me, the best flattener in surgery history has been laparoscopic surgery. And the other ones, new age of connectivity, outsourcing, etc. Yes, but laparoscopic surgery, in my view, has been a flattening surgery. Enormous benefits to patients. I'm gonna go back, and with this, I'm gonna finish, talk a little bit about robots. I have 10 more minutes. AI and more. Robots are nothing new. 1920s, 1950s. What is new is the speed that they are improving. And the robots started, the surgical robots started in the army when people, as you all know, wanted to try to avoid local casualties by healthcare personnel, and they tried to start to develop remote surgery. And that's how everything started. This is the robot that today we think it's fantastic, but to me, this robot today is going to be obsolete very soon. The human knowledge doubling time in the 1900s was 100 years. In 1945 was 25 years. In 2015 was 13 months. And it is felt that with Internet of Things, it may become 12 hours. Human knowledge doubling time. Then that little robot that I show you at the beginning, it's now obsolete. This is the new robot. This new robot is directing now the Italian Symphony Orchestra, and I'm not going to show you the whole video, but this robot learns with artificial intelligence.
I think tonight we are truly writing history, and we're writing the future of robotics applications. Tonight, Yumi will demonstrate how intuitive, how self-learning this machine is. How wonderful our software really is in learning the movement of a conductor, sensing the music, and really conducting an entire team. It also shows how quickly such technology can be installed. One of the biggest barriers in robotics is not the physical hardware. It's the engineering effort that it takes to teach a robot what to do. Tonight, for the first time in history, a robot has learned to conduct an orchestra in just a couple of days.
This robot, because of AI, learns how to conduct the orchestra and progressively improves its own skills by getting the feedback of the sounds of the different instruments and the singers. Then if you really think about it, it's limitless. And this is going to come to surgery. We will have augmented surgery, augmented reality surgery. We will have different instruments. We already see a variety of things. And our hands, our eyes, and our brain are going to be improved, are going to be enhanced, as we already do with the robot today. This is, for example, preoperative planning. There will be no complex surgery in the future. And you will see, you residents will see this, without preoperative planning. We will be putting this, we will do in our surgery in preoperative planning, looking at how the tumor is close to the vessels. The surgery we do today, the complex surgery we do today is going to be obsolete. These are preoperative simulations. This is already happening in percutaneous simulation. If you see this is an adrenal, for example, and you can try to see the vessels. Where is the adrenal vein? How am I going to approach it? How close is for the liver? This is the virtual 3D image that it's being put together also in liver surgery. Here, I'm going to show you the same adrenal that you can see where it is, and then you come during surgery and you can superimpose the image of the adrenal. This is the cava, and you're trying to see where the vein is going to be, and you see where the adrenal is going to be here. And you can try to superimposing where the vein is going to be and try to find it. The problem we have today, particularly in liver surgery, this is fixed, then this is easier. You find the vein. Here is the superimposition of the vein on the image of the CAT scan, and indeed, the vein is right there, making the operation much easier. The problem we have, the limiting factor, particularly in liver surgery, that, by the way, to me, liver surgery today, it's archaic. We go to get a little tumor inside the watermelon, and we have to cut through a lot of good tissue trying to find what this thing is. Well, with augmented reality, we'll be able to be much more directed surgery. The problem is rigid deformation, but everybody's working on this. This is a model from EarCat, and you can see we're trying to move the liver, because the problem is if you put the images from the CAT scan, as soon as you move things, even deform with the pneumoperitoneum, things change. Then these are type of things that technology is going to help, and AI is going to be critical. We will probably have like an airport control tower in the operating room, where there's going to be a team of people doing surgery. It's not going to be just one surgeon. And technology will continue advancing. These are some ants that have cameras here. They have learned from the regular outside cameras, and they learn from each other as they connect to carry this. They touch their little antennas, and their antennas, with the antennas, they transmit each other and they communicate to move stuff. This is the stereo camera, grippers, and then they go in and they can work all day and then go to the charging station and they charge with the same antennas. And after they charge for a couple of hours, they can continue working. Again, the imagination is the limit. However, for successful innovation, what we have learned over all of these years is that you have to have curiosity. You have to have intuition. You have to have passion, diversity of thought. Involve yourself with a lot of people that are like you, positive disruptors. You have to have courage. Don't be afraid of failure. Several of us have failed in some things. As long as you're not damaging anybody, just continue doing it. You need to collaborate and take advantage and seize the momentum. Dr. Schweiders and myself, we were very lucky. We were just finishing our residency training when the laparoscopic revolution started. We jumped at it. I saw a lot of my colleagues that I tried to tell them, go, take it, do it. They didn't. They lost the momentum. That doesn't mean that I'm critical of them. They just chose another path, and each of you should choose your own path. Take home messages. We have come a long way. Major surgical accomplishment with great impact in improving patient care. I do believe we have become better surgeons. I did an open Whipple yesterday, and I was talking to my assistants, and I was saying, you know, my technique is now following the laparoscopic Whipples. And I have become such a much better surgeon, open than what I used to do, what used to be before the laparoscopic Whipples. And by the way, Neha commented, hey, Dr. Asbun, sorry to tell you, but the laparoscopic Whipple is the most boring case this week compared to the other cases we have had. Okay, Neha, you're right. Changes in technology, procedures, culture, and practice pattern will continue at a rapid pace. Remember the human knowledge doubling time. Flatness in surgery have empowered the individual. Be prepared to avoid the negatives. Do not compromise quality for innovation. Ethical principles should not change, and keep the goals the same. The best interest for the patient is the only interest to be considered. Thank you very much.
Horacio, thank you so much. That was a whirlwind tour.
Steve, you're muted.
No. Am I muted? Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. That was a whirlwind tour of innovation, and we can only imagine the kinds of cases that you see down there as a worldwide international referral source. That we're thrilled. We see Neha on the line, that she's getting to participate and see, the kinds of hepatobiliary surgery that's possible. So here's my question for you. If you're thinking about something like a Nissen, I would much rather do a laparoscopic Nissen than an open Nissen. In fact, an open Nissen is actually painful because you can't see as well, you're far away. Has the Whipple progressed to the point where it's actually easier and more enjoyable to do the Whipple laparoscopically than open? Or is it still one of those operations that has still, from a technical point of view, seems a little more straightforward open?
The Whipple laparoscopic, it's a big chore. It is difficult still. However, once you go over the learning curve, and that is for a different conversation, it is a very pleasant operation because you see anatomy the way that you don't see it. And it is extremely enjoyable. The problem is that, and this was the case yesterday, when you have the elderly woman that is thin, that has a very small tumor and ampullary mass, then you wonder, is it really worthwhile adding 2 to 3 hours more to the procedure by doing it laparoscopically when I can finish this operation in 3 hours? Then, and I don't think there's going to be one member of your HPB team that's going to agree with me. But today, I do the majority of the Whipples laparoscopic because those are the difficult Whipples. The easy Whipples, I do it open. The difficult Whipples where there has been neoadjuvant, where the tumor is attached to the vein, where I may need to do a lateral vein resection, those you can do so much better laparoscopic because it's so much more careful. If you get into the vein, the openings are smaller, you can control it better. You can see the posterior aspect where the hole is sometimes. You can go little by little, millimeter by millimeter, but it requires a lot of patience, dedication, and commitment.
I think that's true of a lot of things laparoscopically, because even doing a gallbladder with a hook, in a tough one, you can go millimeter by millimeter, and I think it's safer. One of the things that's been true in COVID, and we hope that you're able to stay safe in Miami, is this rush to publication. And what we've seen in the COVID world is people are rushing to get their name out on papers, and now we're seeing this retraction phenomenon. So it was interesting that this is very much like the beginning of laparoscopic surgery, where people were rushing to put their name on the first this and that. We're just reinventing the wheel as far as those things are concerned. But COVID is going to have an incredible negative economic impact on healthcare. Do you think that we're going to be able to do all this advanced robotics and all this, overlay imaging? What do you see as somebody who's connected worldwide? I mean, nobody has greater worldwide contacts than you, actually. What do you hear from your friends? What do you see as the worldwide impact of COVID on the global production of healthcare?
It's going to be tough. I think that we're going to go through a very difficult period. In a way, may help to weed out things that are really needed versus things that are done just to, for marketing purposes. We have seen a lot of the new technology that has been applied just because they have a good marketing machine. Those things are going to go down the wayside. You're going to have to prove that it's really helpful to the patient. But I do believe that the nature of the humans are to innovate. And I believe that that's not going to stop. It may decrease the pace on things that are expensive, but there are going to be a lot of cheaper ways to do things. And you yourself have traveled so much, Steve, and you have seen how innovative people in poor resource countries are with what they have. And we bring some ideas from them, and it's much cheaper, you know, and then that's not going to stop.
I think that's this has been a remarkable time. If people have questions, just raise your hand on the participant list and we will see you. You made a pretty provocative comment. And you talked about Eddie Joe Reddick. I had an opportunity to take his class and go to his operating room. It was really quite a production. He didn't actually make it very far as a country western singer, as you know. But you said that the intuitive robot is going to be obsolete. So that's a pretty bold statement. And it seemed to me that since we're talking about Eddie Joe, the laser became pretty obsolete. Everybody went out and bought a laser. There was incredible marketing. I came back to my hospital. We need a $250,000 laser. And the laser sat in the corner for a decade before somebody finally pushed it out of the way. What do you think is going to happen? Do you think that these are going to turn into coat hangers the way the laser did, and there's going to be a newer, sleeker, different kind of robot? I mean, you put it out there. So why do you think it's going to be obsolete?
Well, the current model is going to be obsolete. You know, I mean, obviously the current model is the basis of what's going to happen in the future. But I mean, if you really think, Steve, yes, we're at awe. The first time I sat down on the robot, I couldn't believe it. I mean, my first case was an open case that I brought the robot to do an ampulectomy just to see how the robot worked. And I just couldn't believe it, the advantages and the movements and the enhancement. But the reality is, it's a huge machine. It's in your way. The assistants have to be fighting with it. It barely allows you to move the operative table. Those things are going to change. I'm not saying they're going to be obsolete tomorrow, but I can assure you that some of your residents are going to tell their residents, I remember the first robots. There were these huge machines. It was crazy. It's going to be like the video-based education, that you had to do so much with artificial intelligence, with sleek models and so on. We're going to see a lot of other things. I mean, you have been working in some of the other robots already. I'm not saying they're better than intuitive or worse than intuitive. I have no conflicts of interest. I'm just saying that we are going to have to improve. And surgery, surgeons, and technology are now intertwined in a way that's not going to end, and that's going to facilitate the development of new machines, something that wasn't there before laparoscopic surgery.
Yeah, I wonder about this because the laser really wasn't the progenitor of the harmonic scalpel or the ligature or any of these things. The VHS looks nothing like a DVD. I don't know whether the intuitive robot as the market leader will continue to evolve, or whether there will be something truly disruptive, the way ligature and harmonic scalpel were truly disruptive compared to a Bovie, or not. We have a couple of robo surgeons. I see John Butch masquerading with his wife's iPad, or Yaron Perry. John or Yaron, do you think it's going to be an evolution or a revolution in robotic surgery? John.
That was a great lecture, and thank you so much for coming here and talking. And I just was wondering about the question. The change you were alluding to and the change that is happening with surgery in terms of the evolution and how fast it's progressing. It seems like like you said, every couple years, every couple minutes, things are changing. How do you think we're going to adapt? I mean, if before you had 20 years to perfect the Nissen, maybe you had 10 years to perfect laparoscopy, but now with the innovation going so fast, how do we keep up? And how do we do this? We have 5 years of residency. We have, a couple years after that to get proficient. But now with it evolving, the residents come out more technically adept maybe than we are. Do you see a different paradigm in the education process to make us more competent in adapting to this technology?
Thank you. That's a fantastic question, and I don't pretend to know the answer for sure. Having said that, I do believe that there's going to be a couple of things. Some of this technology is going to level the fields. I mean, the robot has already done that, right? I mean, many times I hear that
right, for sure.
enhances the techniques to the point that all surgeons are more equal. And that's a benefit that it's going to be immediately adopted. There are other things that are going to be much more difficult to adopt. As you said, trying to learn the new type of robotic arms that are coming out, the ones you put in your forearms, etc. Then I think it's going to be specialization. I think where the education is going to go, and we have already seen that. The American Board of Surgery is considered areas of focus, etc. We're going to have to do that. We're going to become more and more specific, not only about specialty, but about use of equipment, use of technology, because we won't be able to. And the second way, how I think the second manner how this is going to be tackled, it's going to be, we're going to need support. As I mentioned, there's probably going to be not one surgeon, it's going to be a team doing the surgery. Today, I'm using now indocyanine green to do even my pancreas surgeries. And it's amazing what I'm learning, but I need the rep there to help me navigate the dosage, the timing, the thoughts based on what the rep has seen. Then it's going to be a whole team of people doing the surgery, not just the surgeon. And I made it a little bit of a joke, putting airport tower control, but it may not be that far from that. And going back to you, Steve, I do believe that there's going to be a combination, evolution and revolution, but revolution is going to be the more change on robots.
I mean, it's really a pretty dramatic time. And I think it's hard for all of us as educators, because if you take something as trivial, nothing's trivial. If you take something as common as hernia, you have to teach an open hernia, and you have to teach a Bassini and a mesh and a McVeigh, and then you have to teach a TAP, and then you have to teach a TEP, and then you need to teach it robotically, and maybe you need to teach it on another robot. It's getting hard to figure out how to create a curriculum that will prepare people without creating silos of surgical expertise where you become just the hernia surgeon. Now, people have done that. They have hernia institutes and things like that. But I would contend America still needs general surgeons. They need them at 3 in the morning. They need them at 3 in the afternoon. Not everybody can be specialized. So we have this dichotomy of people who do highly refined surgery, such as dissecting out the unfused ducts in the pancreas, and somebody to be there to deal with the perforated diverticulitis. We have tremendous training challenges to figure out where we're going, at least in this country. And certainly some of these things are true around the world. But I think we're up for the challenge for sure. Phil Glick had made a comment early on about the apprenticeship method with Eddie Joe Reddick. Yes, we took those courses at the Advanced Laparoscopic Training Center in Atlanta. One of the things that I don't know if people picked up on Horacio's slide is he put in the word that Eddie Joe was a pig man. What he meant was he bought a pig company, and so he supplied the pigs for his own training courses. And we never understood why the team was so concerned about making sure we didn't kill the pig during the surgery, is because he recovered the pigs and then used them again later for non-human food consumption activities. But there really were a lot of injuries, and we really didn't know in this revolution about training. There's a lot we didn't know. And this is very similar to COVID. There is a lot we don't know. Chloroquine, no chloroquine, intubate, don't intubate. What do the tests mean? Can you get it twice? We're going through a lot of the same types of anxieties and learning curves that we saw at the very beginning of laparoscopic surgery. It's been pretty interesting, and our goal should always be primum non nocere. And I'm glad you qualified that. Think of a family member that you actually like as part of your decision making. Any other questions for Dr. Asbun? We have 86 people on the line here. That is awesome.
You're on. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're on.
Oh, thank you. So thank you very much for this wonderful talk. And I looking at what you just mentioned, that actually laparoscopic surgery, doing pancreatectomy made you a better open pancreatectomy surgeon. And we see tremendously in CT surgery, since the robot itself, we learned a lot about the mitral valve. We learned a lot about the anatomy of the hilum of the lung and the segmentectomy. that actually when I change to an open or laparoscopic surgery, it's absolutely absolutely helpful. And that's the reason to the question, is it evolution or revolution? I mean, I want to hear your opinion, but I think it's both. I think it's it's an evolution of technology that help us to understand better the anatomy, and it's a revolution to basically to adopt these methods. And yeah, now the arms and the assistants are suffering very hard when you do the robot surgery, but that will change, I believe.
Yeah, I think this is a great time, and I want to sort of conclude on something that Horacio had said. If you think something is crazy, then pay very careful attention to it. And it's been true for so many things, like the people who stopped putting in NG tubes, true for Eric Muhe. It was true for one of our residents at Tufts who said, I'm going to go do a fellowship in the Midwest on this, doing vascular surgery using these endovascular techniques. And the chair of the Department of Surgery at the time said, that's ridiculous, I won't support that. So he went out on his own dime and did one of the very first endovascular fellowships, Jeroen Sternbach, and has made an entire career of watching the world catch on to something that he was specifically told was a bad idea. Now, there are bad ideas in the world for sure, but I think that when somebody is putting something out there that is new and innovative, before you dismiss it, really put thought into it. And one of the classic ironies for me personally, when I first saw the laparoscopic cholecystectomy video at the college, was why would anybody want to ruin a perfectly good operation? Which is pretty ironic for somebody who went on to become the president of SAGES. So we all are in that trap, and we should all take a step back and really think hard before dismissing what may seem like a sacred cow that we just don't want to give up for other reasons. Jim, if you could turn your camera back on. Yay, thank you. So normally we do this in person, but we're living everything in a virtual world. We're teaching virtually, we're meeting virtually. Our Surgery Plus team, we're conducting our graduation virtually. We'll see you tonight. We have a whole production value. This is actually going live on YouTube right as we speak, in addition to Zoom. But we have a gift for you as a token, as a tradition here. We have the crystal buffalo, the pewter buffalo. And so we will be sending this to you, engraved with your name on it. Normally we do a photo op. I'm going to make this print screen. This is our, yes.
My hand's receiving it.
That's our photo op, and we'll send it to you. We're imminently grateful, Horacio. I wish we could have you personally. We will. We'll actually have you come back and talk about pancreatic surgery in detail with us. Western New York is one of the greatest places in the world in this time of year, and we can't do it because of COVID. But we will see you certainly tonight, and incredible grateful. So a round of applause for Dr. Asbun.
Thank you. It's been my honor and my pleasure. Thank you, everybody. It truly has been my pleasure. And I will want to go and see there.
Oh, yeah, we'll definitely have you out.
Yes, I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you again. Appreciate it.
So we now have our white coat ceremony. You're welcome to stay, but we will certainly see you tonight. And again, thank you so much, because you've seen parts of the story that I've never seen. And by collecting these stories, we are able to tell the next generation of surgeons of what to be on the look for as they find their own opportunities to innovate. So that's fantastic. Jim, it's all yours.
Steve.
So I think we'll take a short break. Maybe we could take 10 minutes or so. Let everybody get a cup of coffee, and I'll make sure that the residents are lined up and ready for the white coat ceremony. So we'll be back in 10 minutes if that works for all. Dana, does that seem reasonable to you?
That sounds good. I'll be here.
We can just do it in the year then, I guess that works.
All right, so I think that was a blockly 10 minutes, but 10 minutes nonetheless. I was sort of splitting the difference because we were scheduled to do this at 8:30, so I didn't want to leave anybody out that was coming back for it, but I also don't want to lose anybody while we get ready. This is obviously we've never done it this way before. This is typically something we would do with everybody in the same room, and all of the rising chiefs getting their new white coats, their chief coats placed by the outgoing chiefs, sort of a passing of the baton and a tradition and a pretty important event, I think. And being unable to do that, we went back and forth about what would be safe and what would be reasonable. But we need to be responsible, and people look to us as the example of how to conduct yourself during the COVID pandemic. And so we're trying to be as responsible as we can. And so we've changed things a bit this morning. We're going to have over at the medical school, and I think probably a compliment at ECMC may send a video as well. We're going to have that same event happening remotely, one by one. And I've asked the chiefs to pass along if they have any words of advice that they should give it now, as again, they move on to the next stage in their career, and the new chiefs step up to take control of the service and be the leaders that the outgoing chiefs have been for all these last years. So before we go forward, I want to thank Brian, who I understand less and less every day, but Brian has been instrumental in trying to make all this work, and YouTube Live and everything else. He's been working really, really hard on this, and we've got to acknowledge the amount of work he's put into this whole graduation, along with everybody else. Dana has worked very hard on this with him. Melissa, Mike, Vito, you name it, everybody's really, really worked hard to make this happen. And it's, you know, if it goes off smoothly, it's going to seem easy. It wasn't easy to arrange, I can tell you. So, but with that in mind, Brian, are we all set to get started? And do you need to be pinned? I guess I should ask. That sounds like a weird thing to say to Brian, but.
So I think if any of them, wherever they are, they can just unmute themselves and can talk with, but I will look and see if I can pin Brian.
Looks like he's trying to connect right now, I think.
I'll wait until we see someone other than his finger.
There he is.
There he is, Brian.
You go through like out of the frame.
Do we want to maybe start with ECMC?
Yeah, I think we do. Oh, wait a minute. Something's happening. I don't want to interrupt his thought process. So we'll give him one more minute, and then if we don't have Brian, we'll move to Plan B.
Yeah, at ECMC they look more ready.
Okay, if
All right,
Carrie,
let's
are
do
you?
it.
All
Carrie,
right.
you want to unmute?
We're unmuted.
Now the video's on.
Okay, Andrew, you can go ahead and give some words of wisdom to Mandy.
All right. Mandy and the rest of the Rising Chiefs, this is going to be a great year. This is the best year of residency. So take advantage of every opportunity and enjoy it.
Yay.
Thank you. All right. Brian, or do we have, there's nobody else at ECMC, I don't think. Everybody else is at the med school. Brian, are you there?
We're coming, hold on.
having some technical difficulties.
That'd be great too. Yeah, Rafa.
Here,
No,
we
you're
can
just
use-
gonna use.
Can you guys hear me?
We're good. We're good.
Oh, it's this. It's magical.
Okay, we got you.
All right, you're gonna need to mute your guys. Ready? Rafa, you gotta mute yours. All right. Jane, congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Magellan, myself, Chief, take your time, go slow and relax. Go ahead.
Okay, Jane, thank you.
Yay.
Yeah, both. Continue to be your bubbly self, and everything's going to go great. Take care of your juniors. I know you're going to do awesome.
Yay.
Which camera?
Both of them. Not just kidding. Either one. The one that's streaming.
Got it.
Words of wisdom.
Here we go.
Oh, yay. He's out.
Good luck, Dr. Martinez, Nate, Coco. Thank you.
You made it.
Yay.
Can we get a group chat, guys? Yeah. I think that's everyone.
Wow. Sorry.
Well,
Everyone here. Brandon's going to be here in 2 minutes.
okay, we can wait for it.
Brandon hasn't gotten his yet. Rich went to go get
Oh, wait. I think here comes Brandon.
How's that? All right, guys. Give me 1 second for a still photo. Dana, did Mandy do hers on the Zoom?
She did.
Yes, she did.
That's a great idea.
All right, everybody say cheese.
Cheese.
Or say chief.
Chiefs.
All right, we're good, guys. Congratulations.
Congratulations, guys. Well done. Oh, I think we may still have Brandon.
We've got one more. We've got one more. We've got one more. Sorry, we're not good. Very sorry, very sorry.
Oh, good, he made it.
Yep, they made it. There we go.
Hey.
He should just do his 4th year over again.
Yeah. You're yeah, this is Take pride in what you do. Be good to yourself and your peers and You guys want to reshoot group one more time? Yeah, real quick.
No,
We're both.
George, move in. We can't see you. George,
Oh, yeah.
move in.
George, move.
There you go.
Aw, look at that.
Now, pull back a little bit. All right, guys, we are good in 3, 2, 1, Chiefs. Yeah. All right, okay, guys.
Yay.
Great job. Again, congratulations to everybody. Brian, thank you. And I think that concludes the morning. So we'll all go back to work for a while, and then I think we're going to go on with graduation this evening, which will start at 5 o'clock remotely, and the YouTube channel or sign on or whatever you call it is here on the slide for anybody that doesn't have it, although I think it was sent out. So sign on and you can watch. We'll try to keep it moving. I know it's hard to maintain your focus remotely, so we'll move things through tonight, and we look forward to seeing you then. Thank you.
Jim, thank you so much. And it looks like we're going to need to send surgeons to the film school and get a master's in filmography as one of our Surgery Plus skills for the New World Order. So thank you, everybody. Congratulations to the new chiefs.
I was wishing somebody had a Polaroid at the end there. Might have been a simpler way to go, but you know, what can you do?
That's fantastic. Thank you, Brian.
All right. See everyone tonight.
See you all tonight.